Forget gurus. Forget anyone claiming to be an online business expert without going through the challenges of entrepreneurship themselves. The Real Money, Real Business podcast is here to prove the best insights in online business comes from your fellow online business builders. We dig into stories of entrepreneurs selling their business on the Empire Flippers marketplace so that you can learn how they made their business profitable, how they overcame obstacles, and what lessons they learned in their online journey. If you want to take your business and your knowledge to the next level, you've come to the right podcast. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Real Money, Real Business podcast. I'm Lauren, and today we have Dorian on the show, who's selling an Amazon KDP business on the Empire Flippers marketplace. Hey Dorian, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Lauren. I'm doing very good, thanks.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show. Really looking forward to hearing more about your business and sharing it with our listeners. But before we dive in, I'm going to give them a brief summary of the business so they know what we're talking about. As I mentioned, this is an Amazon KDP business. It was created in June 2014, and it's in the books and culinary niches. The average revenue for the business is $9,010 per month, and it makes an average of $7,521 per month in net profit. The assets included with the business are an Amazon KDP account with 44 books, an Ingram Spark account, contractor contact information, a domain and all site content and files, an email list with 15,000 subscribers, a proprietary book layout software license, SOPs, book content and ISBN numbers for all of the published books, a US copyright registration for 10 books, as well as a Facebook account. For everyone listening, you can visit empireflippers.com/marketplace and search for listing number 62024 to learn more about this business. Or you can unlock this listing to start your due diligence if you're interested in purchasing this asset. So now that we know more about the business, let's hear from the seller. Dorian, can you fill us in on your background in starting and running online businesses?
Of course. Just a little over 20 years ago, I left corporate America to start a design agency, which was focused primarily on, online properties, websites, that kind of thing. After that, I had ideas for software, and I started a software company, which I ran for almost 10 years and sold. And after that, I dabbled in a few other industries. And when I look back, I realized that everything was online in some significant, form. So I have a pretty varied overview of many different models of online business. That's my background.
Great. Yes. As you say, quite a varied background, which I'm sure gave you lots of experience. How did Amazon KDP businesses get onto your radar?
Completely by accident. So in 2014, I was burnt out after a heavy company that was very difficult to run for about 5 years. I was really looking for something that was much easier. And I completely by accident ran into a friend who showed me a couple of cookbooks that he had published on KDP and was making a little bit of money from. And quite honestly, I do not know what attracted me to that other than this feeling that perhaps I could take that business and turn it into something that was more passive in nature, which, would meet my personal goals a lot better than the previous companies that I'd had. So I started thinking about it, and I learned as much as I could about KDP, and then I jumped in.
Wonderful. Yeah, it sounds like it was exactly what you needed at that time in your life. Why did you choose to go into this particular niche? Were you following in your friend's footsteps?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I forget now because it's 8 years later, but I often forget how much of a novice I was in terms of anything having to do with cooking. I was not a cook at the time, but monkey see, monkey do. My friend was doing cookbooks and he said it was very easy. And so that's what I started with. And because I have a design background, I was not intimidated by the idea of, producing cookbooks because of all the graphical elements. And so I thought, well, perhaps that gives me an advantage over, some of the other niches on Amazon. And what really attracted me to the idea of KDP was that all that I had to do was come up with a clever idea, produce good content, and then Amazon would do the rest. They would deal with the customer, They would, print everything, handle returns and all the money. And then they would just send me royalty checks after I did my work. So to me, after having run businesses for, 20 years, that required a lot of my energy and interaction with employees and, all the other stuff. This seemed like an ideal way to craft a passive income business. So I jumped into there. And with the cookbooks, it was my first kind of real try, at KDP. I think I did try coloring books a couple of times. That just wasn't happening. But I found success with cookbooks. I tried a few ideas and one of them stuck. I won't disclose what that was, but very quickly, within 3 months of starting this KDP business, I was up to over $10,000 of revenue per month. And really ever since then, it's been a 6-figure business every single year.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a great success story and wonderful that you were able to get it off the ground so quickly. You have branched out from KDP onto some other sales platforms as well. Can you walk us through what other sales platforms you use and what percentage of revenue they make in the business?
Sure. I need to say right up front, represents maybe 95% of the revenue for the business. So if that were the only platform, that would suffice. I also last year started branching off into Ingram, Spark, and so far, nothing too impactful has come from Ingram. Although in July, for some reason, one of the books really took off in Ingram, and that ended up representing about 20% of July's revenues. Ingram, I don't really know, to be honest. It's a black box to me. I upload books to Ingram, and then I just let the money come in. I have no idea what I'm doing there.
Yeah, it's great that you were able to diversify a bit of your revenue, though. It certainly sounds like you've been on a long journey with this business. It came to you in the right point in your life. What are the reasons that you're selling it now?
As I mentioned earlier, when I started the business, I was not very skilled at cooking. Now, 8 years later, I'm still not very skilled at cooking. I do know much more now than I did, 8 years ago. And I have acquired quite a lot of cooking tools, which are in storage somewhere. This is a hard question to answer. And just, to be very direct and honest, I'm bored. I'm not passionate about cooking. And I think to get into, let's say, third gear with this business, it would be better if I was more passionate and if I wanted to go deeper into the business. So I decided to sell the business last year. At that time, it was spread out into 3 separate KDP accounts. So I decided to consolidate everything into one KDP account to make it easier to sell. And it took a little time to do that. And that's why I'm selling, even though I took the decision last year, that's why I'm selling it this year. And other than just being, I guess, not passionate about cooking, I am starting something new in a slightly different industry and niche. And I would prefer to have more velocity. I like throwing myself 100% into something. And so, that's the basic reason.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've certainly got exciting times ahead of you. And as you say, I think it's important to wake up every morning and be excited about what you're going to do for the day. So it does sound like the right time for you to be moving on from this business. Looking back over your time with this business, what stands out as the biggest win that you had since starting the business?
The business itself was a huge win for me, just in terms of the simplicity, the relatively passive nature of the business, compared to everything else that I've done. It's just been pretty incredible. But within the business, I'd say the biggest win has been figuring out systems to create higher quality books in a shorter amount of time and at a lower cost. So my experience as a software business owner and with other related, things that I've done in my life, especially on the design side, allowed me to approach this from a process kind of, perspective and to set up systems. And so one of the things that I did was, I noticed that creating a new cookbook from scratch, a lot of independent cookbook creators use Microsoft Word or some other just really basic software that ends up producing low quality printed cookbooks, perfectly adequate for Kindle. But in the cookbook industry, 90% of the revenue is in paperbacks or, physical books because, who wants to have a Kindle on their, next to their oven where, you spill things on it, whatever. You want to have a physical book. So And you want to be able to read the recipes easily. And so they need to be laid out correctly and beautifully. And that's very hard to do in simple software like Word. So to produce a high quality book that has a long sales arc, like, that will last a long time on Amazon, you want to have a good looking book that has, photos, is laid out beautifully, easy to read. And you need to do that in InDesign, which is a professional layout software that not anyone can easily use. It takes a little bit of training to be able to do that. So what I did was I figured out a system to be able to use Microsoft Word as the basis for the books, but then my software takes that and lays out the entire book in InDesign just by clicking a button, and you wait 1 minute and then your 160-page book is completely laid out. And that's based on templates and that kind of thing. So I can greatly reduce the amount of production time that it takes for a book when you're producing that beautiful cookbook that is what people need and want. So to me, that was a huge win. And that occurred about 3.5 years ago. And since then, I was able to produce, there's a huge change in my business in terms of when you look at the quality of the books and how happy people are with those books. So huge win. Another huge win for me was sort of learning all the things that didn't work with KDP and cookbooks. And I tried a lot of things over the years and finally, got it through my thick head that, a very simple and straightforward marketing plan is what works best. And I've been sticking to that ever since learning that. I won't tell you what it is. I will tell the buyer, of course, I'll give all that information, but I'm retaining that from public disclosure.
Yeah, it's wonderful that your previous experience was able to help you with this business. And I'm sure it was very satisfying to be able to streamline those processes as well. I'm sure not everything went as smoothly as that. What was your biggest setback or challenge?
Well, it's part of one of the wins that I stated. So really the biggest setback and challenge was figuring out, just taking all the time and the expense to figure out all the things that don't work. If I could go back to the early days and, give myself a little bit of advice and say, don't bother with all those marketing channels and all those other things. It'll just be a waste of time and money. Instead, put that money towards, things you want to do. I would love to be able to do that. So that was really the biggest challenge, was figuring out what everyone says works does not work. There's a lot of gurus out there, and I tried, I think, just about everything that I heard about or read about, and most of it just doesn't work. And, the other side of that is, learning what does work and then sticking to it. Now I have a process that, has longevity to it. So, there was a failure that turned into a win.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to be said for keeping things simple and not overcomplicating things by adding too many processes and strange techniques into the mix. Looking at your traffic now, do you use Amazon PPC or listing description SEO to drive people to your books?
Yeah, most of the traffic is organic on Amazon. That being said, Amazon PP is definitely important and has an impact. So I have metrics that I've learned that work for my business in terms of the percentage of, overall sales, like how much to apply towards advertising. There's also metrics that I follow very closely within the Amazon marketing or advertising module. So there's a couple of numbers I look at, and it's not just the ACoS that everybody looks at, but there's other numbers I look at that very, very quickly let me decide whether an ad or certain keywords are working or need to be adjusted. So yeah, definitely the advertising on Amazon is very important. But that being said, most of my sales come from organic rankings.
I think that highlights the quality and attractiveness of your books, that most of your sales come from organic sources. You mentioned you've tried out a bunch of different marketing techniques over the years. Are you doing anything over and above PPC to help drive traffic to your books?
No, I'm not. If you would have asked me that a couple of years ago, I would have said, yeah, I'm trying this and that. But no, it's just, in my opinion, for cookbooks, I just think it's a waste of time. I'm willing to be proven wrong. Absolutely. I'm a very open-minded person, but anything that I've tried off of Amazon was either too expensive or it wasn't as efficient. It just was not as good as Amazon advertising. It's pretty amazing. What Amazon has built is very useful and you see results immediately. So, why go further?
Yeah, absolutely. PPC is extremely effective, as is all the organic algorithms as well. You've got quite a substantial email list. Do you leverage that list in any way?
No, I don't. So, in terms of list building, I've been fairly successful at that in terms of list nurturing. And what do people say that, you should be able to get $1 per name per month, something like that? I have no idea. I don't know how to do that. I think that a big reason is because I'm not passionate about cooking. And so I'm not willing to go deep. I'm pretty lazy, to be truthful. I focus on the books and on some of the marketing, and then I put them out there, and that's it. So the email list for someone who's passionate, I think, could be a huge, huge asset, but that's just not me.
Well, with that in mind, what do you see as the major growth opportunities that buyers can leverage with this business?
Well, for one thing, the business is very seasonal at this point. Quite a lot of the revenue comes from the Christmas season, the holiday season. November, December, January are just, it's like a mountain. When you look at the sales, there's this mountain in the winter and then the valleys. So one opportunity is to put more energy into books that do well in the summer. Another opportunity, well, the obvious one is the mailing list. I mean, for someone who's passionate and wants to put the effort into it, I think that could double the revenue from the business. I think that one kind of asset, if it's developed by someone who knows how to do it, I think that could be a pretty big win. Other opportunities are, there's something that I could do, but not being passionate about the business. I took a year off last year, so I didn't really do anything with the business. But what I started to do again recently, and which I think is a good opportunity, is to go back to some of the books that have come to the end of their arc. I mean, every book has an arc. And what I've noticed is that when a book starts trailing off, that it can rise again like the phoenix. All you need to do is take the content and, put a new cover on it, a new title, maybe change a few words, but not many within the book, and then send it out. And oftentimes that becomes another bestseller. That's happened to me multiple times. And I can certainly point that out to the buyer and show exactly which books did what when and show what I did and, how to find a new angle for the same content so that it becomes more relevant again. That's just part of the game, I think. But I think that's a good opportunity. There's certainly some good books that could turn into, bigger winners by, kind of reinventing them, or at least reinventing the cover. Beyond that, there's other things that I think could take a little more energy. One thing that happened to me a couple of years ago is a product manufacturer approached me and was interested in purchasing 100,000 copies of one of my books to include that into a bundle that he would offer in one of the big box stores. And I think that's a really good opportunity, especially if you have a book that has, it's already made, right? And already proven in the market, has good reviews, then there's an opportunity to approach product manufacturers and see if there's, ways to either white label the book or sort of, see how it could fit with that product. So that's something that, again, if I was passionate about this industry, I would go deeper into that as well. Those can be pretty big wins. There's a lot more.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of quick wins as well, low-hanging fruit that buyers can really latch onto, which is fantastic. So Dorian, you mentioned you have a design background. Do you create the book covers yourself?
Thanks for asking. No, I don't. So even though I have a design background, actually, and I'd love to talk about that because that influences the rest of the production process. But for the covers, I really go by what I notice in the market. And I've studied cookbook bestsellers extensively. And I've developed an internal, what I call a cheat sheet that has a lot of examples of successful book covers. And I give that to my cover designer and I highlight the 3 or sometimes 4 qualities that a particular cover needs to have in a niche. All of that is based on, like I said, analyzing bestsellers and also getting a feel for what works, based on, the 8 years that I've been doing this. So it's a long answer to your question. No, I don't do the cover design myself. I give very specific instructions. I give them a cheat sheet, and then I'm the final set of eyes that look at the cover. And if I'm not convinced, then it goes back to the designer.
Dorian, you mentioned that your design background does influence other areas of content production. Can you walk us through the areas that you found it useful?
Yes, thanks. I've already mentioned the design software that I developed, which lays out books in design, which is really important if you want to do good quality books. But there's other parts of that process, what content to develop first, how to choose images, where to place those kinds of things, that my design experience really helped me kind of understand and develop into SOPs, for the business. So at this point, every book goes through the same process. We have a research process that's, again, it's not left up to chance. Let's just put it that way. Everything is very tightly, I wouldn't say controlled, but let's say guided so that we stay on the right path, from the research to the writing, to the layout, to the photo selection, cover design, and then finally to the release of the book. One more thing that I would say about that is that we start with the end result first, and then we work backwards from there. We start with the end result first, meaning that we identify what the perfect book is for the niche, and then we use our process to make that happen, to produce it. So again, like a lot of this, it's internal processes, internal templates that we use, and that work pretty successfully. And that's, of course, everything will be given to the buyer.
Yeah, fantastic. It certainly sounds like a very well thought out process. Now, you've mentioned that you do try and make this business as passive as possible for you. What does a typical work week look like for you in running the business? How many hours do you spend on it? And what sort of activities take up your time?
So there's basically two modes to this business that I have, switching back and forth, kind of vacillating between. One is maintenance, and typically that's 1 to 2 hours a week for maintenance. And that's me logging into KDP just to make sure that the numbers, there's no problems or unexpected things happening. And that's, looking at the sales projections. The other thing that I do is I log into the Amazon advertising console and I look for anything that stands out and I correct it. So in order for me to do that with the advertising and just keeping a track of sales, that usually takes about 1 to 2 hours a week. And that may be, on Monday, I log in, I have a look, and that's, 15 minutes. And then maybe on Thursday, I spend an hour correcting something. I mean, I like to look. As part of my morning routine, I go in, I look at the numbers, and it just takes a couple of minutes, but I like having my finger on the pulse. So that's maintenance. And then there's production. And with production, the research, the writing, the design, and book production, all that is done by people that I hire. They're contractors that I've worked with for a while now, and which, by the way, I'd be happy to introduce to the buyer. So they do all that work. But what I do is I spend my time looking at Amazon and looking for new niches, looking for things that interest me and that I think that I can, do an excellent cookbook for, hopefully excellent. And then the rest of the time is spent either communicating with contractors, following up with contractors, reviewing what they've done, and, generally pushing things forward as one has to do. So I'm kind of an all or nothing guy. When I go into production mode, I don't just do one cookbook per month. I'll do 4 or 5 per month, which is, it's a lot, but I like going all in. So when I'm in production mode, typically, that's multiple books going on at the same time. And so I would say an hour a day, maybe somewhere around there. I mean, it's hard to pin down because I also tend to think a lot about things. Even if I'm not doing anything, I'll think about it. So let's just say, to be safe, 2 hours a day. And yeah, that's production mode.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like you've got all the processes down pat. And as you say, a lot of that time is just sort of taking up mental space, thinking about the business as well. You do have a team that helps you with various aspects of the book production. Can you walk us through the team and what everyone does?
Yeah, sure. I have someone who is a former writer. He wrote multiple books for me. And I've trained him how to do market customer research. So when I come up with a book concept, I have him do deeper research based on a template that I developed. And what we end up with is a very concise map, like an outline of exactly the book that we need to produce. And that comes from that research. Once we have that, then it goes to the writer. And there's multiple sources that I use for writing. Recently, I started using Urban Writers because they're easy and the price difference is not significant from what I was paying my writers directly. It's just, an extra layer of management that they provide. So it's good. And then it goes to my book production people and then to the cover designer. So there's a lot of steps in between, but those are kind of like the major outline right there. And I could go deeper into it. But again, we're kind of touching on internal processes, which I will gladly share with someone looking at the business, but not to the public.
Yeah, it's great that you've got that team to back you up and take a lot of that load off of your plate, which I'm sure helps out a lot. What do you think the biggest challenge will be for a buyer taking over this business?
It depends on the buyer's experience and how this business fits into their life, either whether they're bringing it into an existing business or, whatever. Yeah, I can't speak to that. So the biggest challenge is going to be if they're not familiar with KDP, then they're either going to be really impressed at how simple it is, or, they may have to go through a little bit of a learning curve. But I think the biggest challenge is going to be with learning how to produce a high quality cookbook, like, something it's not just the content, but it's the physicality of the cookbook, like the layout. When you open it and you're looking at the pages, is it easy to read? Is it nice? Is it appealing? To me, that's for someone who does not have a graphic design background, that can be intimidating. On the other hand, I've got 8 years worth of processes that I've developed that, result in high quality, books. So once you step into that, it should be pretty easy. The other challenge can be Amazon advertising. And all these things they're nothing compared to a lot of the other businesses that I've seen in my life. So, and I'm very happy to show the buyer and to train the buyer and to make sure that they're successful with, maintaining and growing the business.
Yeah, well, on that note, how much support are you willing to offer the buyers to help ease the transition for them?
As much as they need. I don't think that more than few weeks would be necessary, but whatever they need, honestly. We can go into, you want to have like a monthly coaching call or something like that. I'd be happy to do that. I love the business. I'm just not passionate about this particular niche, but the business, I can talk about that forever with anyone, and I'm happy to do so.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think buyers will be very relieved to have your support when they take this over. When it comes time to negotiating the sale, would you be open to something like an earn-out agreement?
I would consider it, but I have to say that it would have to be a small percentage of the price.
Sure, yeah. And would you commit to a non-compete agreement?
In cookbooks, yeah, sure. Not a problem.
Fantastic. Well, Dorian, that leads us to the final question of the interview, which is, if you had to put yourself into the shoes of a buyer, why do you think your business is a business worth buying?
Right. So in general, a KDP business, if it's set up properly and has a good catalog, is a fantastic business to buy, because once you've earned your place in the Amazon algorithm, it tends to stick and for a long time. And I do have multiple books that perform very, very well and have done so every year since 2015. And then why my particular KDP business, which is in the cooking niche, if that's a niche that you are passionate about, then I can think of no better business. The titles are good. The content is good. The positions in the algorithm for many of the books is really good and robust. And in fact, I can give one example of a book that it's an unusual book. There are no photos in it. It's printed in black and white. It's very small. And yet, because that book earned a position in the algorithm, since 2015, it produces a surprising amount of revenue every Christmas. It just comes back and then Amazon pushes it because Amazon has had good experience with it, has a good history with Amazon, and they know that they'll be able to sell it. I've got a good number of books that are in that position within Amazon. Another reason is because my processes I've developed them from my experience as a software company owner and also as a graphic designer. And now that I think of it, what better background to develop processes for cookbooks, which are, graphically intensive, and then to add the element of software. So my processes and my software would allow you to create a cookbook of a quality equal to any that you would find on the shelf at Barnes & Noble. Full color, beautifully laid out, beautiful fonts, all that kind of stuff, in a small fraction of the time and at a small fraction of the cost that it would take another publisher to produce the same book. I don't need to give examples, but yeah, just walk over to any bookstore, pick up a cookbook, and most of those cookbooks are quite expensive. And I'm not talking about the photography side. I'm talking about just the production, laying it out, making it look nice. And you would have the ability to create those cookbooks and just to run circles around other publishers. So between the position of my books, the quality of the books, and the processes, it's a fantastic business to buy and to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly sounds like there's so much potential that buyers can really tap into. It's an excellent opportunity for anyone looking to own a KDP business. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that I might have missed?
Yeah, this is a little bit self-serving, but I'll say it anyway. This interview is in August, and keep in mind that the biggest season for cookbooks is right around the corner. So if you want to reap the rewards of that high revenue season, now's a good time to get in and, start working it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point for buyers to keep in mind. Well, thank you so much, Dorian, for taking the time out of your day to share more about your business with us. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Lauren. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you as well.
Wonderful. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. To learn more and see if this listing has already been sold, head over to empireflippers.com/marketplace and search for listing number 62024. If you're watching this on YouTube, click the link in the description to go straight to the listing. Once you've unlocked this listing, you'll be given everything you need to know about this business. So until next time, enjoy your digital journey.